My name is Sarah. It is just me today, but I will be keeping an eye on the Q&A panel. So if you do have any questions as we go along, feel free to pop them in there, and I have a little time, put a little time aside at the end just to pick up any questions. So we'll start off by taking a look at some different attachment types. So just a bit of an introduction and the different types of attachments. We'll then move on to working out how much to deduct. So is it going to be specific or a calculated amount? We'll then take a look at how to actually set up and assign the attachments to your employees. We'll then move on to processing attachments through your and payments, and we'll take a look at some pay slips and reports as well. We'll then wrap things up by looking at some further support to finish off. Let's get started with today's session. So firstly, what is an attachment of earnings? Well, an attachment of earnings is something that's issued under a court order to make payment of debts by direct deductions from, in this case, the employee's earnings. The type of attachment, length of the attachment, and the way it's actually deducted will be communicated to you via the letter that you receive in the court order or issuing authority. So in Stage 50 Payroll, there are 17 different attachment types, as you can see in the screenshot. So they're going to relate to different debt deduction orders that you might receive from the court. So first, I want to go through a little bit about what some of these are. And what I've done is I've grouped these into 5 different categories. So let's take a little look at these different categories. So first is debt deductions. Now these are references number 1, 4, and 12. They're classed as priority and non-priority, and that will be made clear on the information that you receive, whether it's priority or non-priority. So the attachment names are 1971 priority and 1971 non-priority, or you've got the fines enforcement attachment as well. So that is an attachment that has tables to calculate the amounts, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the webinar. The next category is child maintenance attachments. So these are references number 2, or more commonly reference 14, which is child support 2012. The main difference between these two is that child support 2012 uses something called a protected earnings of 60% instead of a specified fixed amount, which the other child support attachment would do. Now, the next attachments relate to community charge or council tax debt. So they're references 5 and 6 for community charge. That's just an official name for poll tax from the 90s. So it's not going to be really all too common these days. And then you've also got council tax attachments as well. So these relate to all different kinds of council tax debts. So that's reference 7, with the exception of your Welsh council tax, which does has its own category there at the bottom, number 17. Next, you have your Scottish earnings arrestments. So they're going to fall into references 8, 9, and 10. And then finally, you've got some more recent attachment types. So benefit debt deductions, or more commonly known as direct earnings attachments. These are references 15 and 16. So you've got a normal rate DAA and a higher rate DAA. DAA just means direct earnings attachment. So you might hear me reference that a couple of times during the webinar. So that's it for an introduction to some of those different types of attachments, a few of which we will be talking about today. But if you do want to find out more, make sure to download the handout, and you will be able to click on the link to get more information on that. So moving on to working out how much to actually deduct for your attachments. So there are 2 ways that an attachment type can be deducted. Now, the first way would be that the order has something called a normal deduction rate. So that's going to be a specific amount that needs to be deducted each pay period. And often with these attachments, they will also have something called a protected earnings. So that's going to be a specific amount that the deduction must not reduce the employee's net pay below. So just for a bit of a real life example, so let's say the protected earnings for an employee was £1,200. The attachment itself it wouldn't actually be able to deduct an amount that would take the employee's net pay below that £1,200. So as a result, if there was some of the attachment that couldn't be deducted because of that protected earnings, in some cases, it might carry that extra amount forward into the next pay period. And then if the wage allows, it can get that little bit extra next time round. But we will be looking at an example of that later on. There is also an option to set up an admin fee. So that is just where you can deduct £1 per attachment towards your costs as an employer. It is totally optional with this one, but it does come off the employee's wage. But again, we will take a little look at that a little bit later on. Then just a little bit more about the image on this slide over on the right hand side. So that's an image of a CAPS attachment, and that is the kind of attachment that would tell you how much to deduct each pay period. It would also tell you what the protected earnings are for that attachment too. So that is one way the attachment could deduct. So normal deduction rate with protected earnings, and that's going to be a set amount as detailed in the letter. Now, the other way to calculate an attachment deduction is with the attachment of earnings tables. Now, this is usually using tables with bands for either weekly or monthly paid employees. And it's usually going to be a percentage of those earnings to deduct for the attachment. I do have a bit of a screenshot here, just a little bit of an example for council tax. So these tables are for monthly and weekly employees. And you can also find these in your company legislation option in Payroll. So if we just take a look at the left-hand side table for the weekly deduction rates. Now, let's say an employee was, their attachable pay was £280 per week. That would actually fall into the second last row of the table here. So if it's £280 they're getting paid per week, attachable earnings, they would fall into that category. And the percentage that would be deducted is 12%. So that would go towards the council tax debt. So good thing with these tables, they are built into the programme already. And as I say, you can find them in company legislation. So depending on the attachment type that you are processing, Payroll will refer to these tables in the legislation area, and it will automatically work out how much to deduct if the attachment type uses the tables. So let's get jumped into Payroll and look at a little bit of a demo. I'm going to jump into my Payroll here. Now let's take a little look at the tables first. So if I go into company, just in the bottom left of my Payroll, and I'm going to go into legislation just under my tasks on the left hand side. What you'll see here is we have a tab for AEO rates. So that's just attachment of earnings orders rates. Now, not all attachments have tables. So if we look at 1971 priority, for example, you can see if they don't use the tables, this area will be blank. It's nothing to worry about because you will process those differently. But if we compare that to an attachment that does use the tables, so say we use council tax again, it will pull through the tables it does use within the calculation. We'll have previous year rates on here as well, but if it is recent, you just want to be using the most recent one. So these are the bands that you would look at for your weekly or monthly employees. Now, something I do want to note is it might be that you have a higher paid employee. So it might be that they're earning over £505 a week or £2,020 per month. Just want to reference this little note at the bottom. So it says where the attachable earnings exceed the highest entry shown on the table, the highest entry will be used up to the attachable value, and 50% will be taken from the remainder. So if they are a high earner, if they're earning over £2,020 per month, anything over that is just taken as 50% towards the attachment. But we will come back to that a little bit later on. So I will be showing some examples of calculations, and it will put it into a bit more context at that point. But these legislation tables are really handy. They can also help you establish what type of attachment you've received. So it might be sometimes that you've been given information with the tables, but maybe not an attachment name. So you might not be too sure which category to use or which attachment type it is. What I would recommend is if you do have some tables coming into your company legislation and just having a look through the different kind of attachments on here just to see what matches. So it can be handy to help identify that. I'm just going to cancel out of here for now. Let's just jump back to the slides. So what actually counts as earnings when it comes to attachments? Well, it is going to be most payments that are subject to tax and national insurance that are going to be included in your attachable pay. So that's going to include wages and salary, including any bonuses or overtime, and your holiday pay as well. Also, any pension payments, so if the employee is paid into a pension through an occupational scheme, any statutory sick pay as well. But I do just want to clarify that is the only statutory payment that counts as attachable pay, so do just bear that in mind. Now, what's not included is things like redundancy pay and your other statutory payments as well, so your maternity or paternity and any adoption pay. So those aren't going to be included. So sick pay is the only one that would be included in your attachable pay. But there is a little bit more information linked at the bottom as always. So I just wanted to set the scene a little bit with attachments there, but I do want to move on to more the main part of the webinar now, which is going to be how to set up and assign attachments. When you receive an attachment order for an employee, first of all, you want to decide or not if you're going to add that admin fee on there. Again, that is totally optional, but you just want to decide as an employer if you want to deduct that admin fee. If you are, as you can see on the screenshot on the left, there's going to be a little bit of a drop-down menu for each attachment type. So you can either select yes or no, depending on whether you do want to apply that admin fee. You do also have the option of adding something called a replacement description for your attachments. This is just going to replace the text that you're going to see on the payslip and any other reports. But I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on. Second thing to bear in mind is how your payments are set up, so any pay elements. So on the right hand side there, you can see a few tick boxes, so community charge, council tax and other attachments. So you just want to make sure that the relevant pay elements are set up if they do count towards your attachable pay. So if they're subject to tax and NI, for example, most likely they are going to be subject to attachments as well. So let's jump back into Payroll and take a little look at setting these up and the different settings. So I'm going to stay in my company tasks in the bottom left. And I'm going to go into my pay elements this time. As you can see, there is a specific attachment of earnings order tab. So I'm going to go along to this tab. And you can see we've got our different attachments in here. So we've got all 17 attachments within this window. Now, if I wanted to select to set an admin fee for one of them, so I'm just going to change that to yes for my admin fee. Now I'm going to do that on my council tax attachment. So that would deduct the £1 admin fee if someone has the council tax attachment assigned to them. Now you do also have a column for replacement description here. Now what that's going to do is that's just going to replace this standard description with whatever you fill into this box here. So it might be that you want a bit of a clearer description. So maybe these 1971 priority and 1971 non-priority, they might confuse my employee. So I want to put that as something a little bit clearer. So I'm just going to change this to priority, attachment of earnings, and non-priority. Payroll. So this replacement description is now what I would see on my payslip and any other reports as well. So I've set my admin fee for council tax, put my replacement descriptions in. I'm just going to press OK. Now, another thing I want to select is I want to check my payments as well. So I want to make sure that everything I need to be included is ticked for attachments. So I do want my overtime. So I'm going to edit my overtime. I want to ensure these 3 boxes over on the right-hand side are ticked. So I'm happy with that. Same goes with commission, because that is going to be included in attachable pay. So again, I want to check that those 3 boxes over on the right-hand side are correct. Now, expenses would not be included in attachable pay. They're non-taxable, non-NIable. So I just want to make sure that they're completely cleared down, which they are. So I'm in a place now where my settings are correct. I've set my admin fee or any replacement descriptions. So I can now start adding my attachments into my employees. Just a bit of a top tip as well, if you are troubleshooting any attachment issues, so maybe the figure doesn't quite look how you would expect it to, this is always a good starting point. So just making sure all of your payments are configured correctly. So now we're ready to enter the attachment into the employee record. Now there's 3 attachments I'm going to look at today. So I'm going to go into employee and into my employees record. Now employee 1 is going to have a council tax attachment. So to add that, I'm going to go along to the employment tab and just into pay elements down at the bottom. You can then see we now have a specific attachment of earnings orders tab in here. So I'm going to click on that tab. I'm going to click on the drop down for attachment name. And I'm going to go and add my council tax attachment in here. And see that will pre-populate some details. Now, because the council tax attachment uses the tables, what you'll probably have noticed is it has ticked this box here in the bottom right. So it's going to use the tables for the calculation, which is great because that's exactly what we want. Now, because it's using the tables, you'll notice that we can't actually enter a normal deduction rate or protected earnings. They will stay as 0 because the system is going to use the tables to calculate that. Now, what I can put in is I can put in a total attachment. So I've been told that's 5,500. And that's going to be the figure that the attachment's going to calculate up until. So once you've entered your total attachment, I'm just going to pop in an audit issue date. And a reference as well. So audit issue date and any references are usually going to be found on the letter. I'm going to leave my order end date blank. I would only really fill that out if I had been instructed to do so. So if the attachment was stopping early or something like that. So that's that first attachment done. I'm just going to save that and save the record. Now the second attachment I'm going to look at is for employee 2. So again, I'm going to go into the employment tab and into my pay elements and along to attachment of earnings orders. Now this employee has a child support attachment that I need to add. Now I have been told that it's got a normal deduction rate, but there is a protected earnings of 60%. So because of those protected earnings of 60%, I know it's going to be a more recent child support attachment, which is going to be child support 2012. So rather than reference number 2, I'm going to go down. I'm going to use reference 14, which is my child support 2012. What that's going to do is that's going to use the 60% of the protected earnings. So added that in from the drop down. Now this one does use a normal deduction rate. So you'll see I am actually now able to edit this field. So the normal deduction rate I've been told is £240 per pay period. Now, protected earnings, that's going to pull through automatically from the legislation as 60%. So I'm not going to change anything in there. Something as well with child support, of course, it does tend to be an ongoing attachment too. So there's not normally a total amount with this one. So if that is the case, you can leave that as 0. And what that means is it's going to keep deducting the necessary amount until you're instructed to stop the attachment. In which case, as I mentioned before, you would just come in here and enter an order end date to put a stop to that deduction. I'm just going to change the order issue date and pop in a reference for that one as well. That's my second attachment saved. I'm going to save the employee's record. So the last attachment I'm going to add is for employee 3. Again, I'm going to be in my employment tab and back into Pay Elements and along to attachment of earnings orders. Now, this employee has been given a non-priority attachment. What you'll notice is my non-priority has actually got the replacement description in there as well. So we were given a normal deduction rate and a set protected earnings to put in, but wasn't mentioned that it was priority. So this one is going to be a non-priority. So we've got the new replacement name in there. And I'm going to enter my normal deduction rate. It's going to be £150 per pay period. And this time I am actually able to enter a set protected earnings in there, which is going to be £1,000. And then a total attachment, which is £3,000 for this employee. And same with the order issue date. I'm just going to change that as per the letter. And you'll notice that the box at the bottom isn't ticked for this, and that is correct. We don't want it to be ticked because this attachment isn't going to use any of the tables. It is just going to use the rates that we have set. So that's a normal deduction rate and the protected earnings as well. I'm just going to save that for my third employee. Close out the record. Let's just do a little bit of a recap of what we've looked at so far. So that's all the attachments set up, and I've assigned them to 3 employees. I've set the admin fee for the council tax attachment in my company Pay Element settings. And I did also add replacement descriptions for a couple of attachments too, which is done in the same place. We've then went in and assigned those in the employment tab of the record, and then the Pay Elements. And then we've went along to the attachment of earnings order tab. From there, we've just filled in the relevant information from the letter. So you'd select the attachment type, fill in whether it's got a normal deduction rate, any protected earnings. Just remember to double check that tick box at the bottom right as well. So just make sure it's ticked if the attachment type is going to use the tables. So things like your council tax or your direct earnings attachments as well. But with them assigned and ready to go, that does bring us on to the next part of the webinar, which is processing attachments. So where we can check that they're being deducted in our pay run. So let's get jumped back into payroll. So back into payroll, I've already set my processing date. So I'm just going to double check that. So 31st of October is our next processing date. You can double check that by looking at the status bar just in the bottom right as well. So I'm now going to go ahead and jump into my enter payments. And I just want to check that these attachments are calculating how I would expect them to calculate. And I also do want to explain a little bit as to how they're getting to those figures as well. So employee 1 is getting £3,000 in salary. They have commission of £150 and they have £45 expenses. But remember that expenses do not count towards the attachable pay. Now, what you'll notice in Enter Payments is we have an Attachments tab. So I'm just going to go and have a little look in there. So you can see that the council tax attachment is getting pulled through. So the attached value is pulled through automatically. That's going to be how much is going to be deducted. The admin fee, remember we did set that to yes for council tax. And then we have the attachable value as well. So attachable value is just going to be the gross attachable pay minus the tax and the national insurance. So let's take a little look at how it's getting to that value. So I'm actually just going to go and check the legislation tables for this one. So if we come out of Enter Payments, and if we go into Company and Legislation, we can go along to our Attachment of Earnings Order Rates and look at council tax. So as you can see, they are actually earning over the upper limit, so the £2,020. So do remember, we're going to have to take 50% from the remainder. So we do want to take that into account when we're doing the calculation. I'm just going to close out of here, go back into Enter Payments. And along to attachments. So what I'm going to do is, let me just get my trusty calculator up and I'll bring that across. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the attachable earnings, so that's the 2351,984. So first, what we need to do is we need to take away the £2,020 to find whatever the excess is. I'm going to minus £2,020, which means we have £331.84 excess. So we do just want to take 50% of that. So I'm just going to divide that by 2. Which is £165.92. So that's a bit extra that we want to take. Now we do want to work out the 17% as well of the £2,020. So if I do the £2,020 times the 17%, that gives us the £343.40. And we do just want to add those two together now. So we're going to add the £165.92. And that gives us our total of the £509.32 that is getting deducted this pay period. So that's how it's getting to the attached value. Now, the amount that's deducted this period is going to be taken from the total attachment value, and that attachment is going to be calculated and deducted until the total has been reached, or I've been notified to stop the attachment, in which case I would go in and enter the order end date in there. But that's all calculating fine for me, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to move on to my next employee. Employee 2. So my second employee has got this child support attachment, which is deducting an amount of £240 per pay period. So because it's not using the tables, I am able to actually edit this field, but I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. And we don't have an admin fee with this one. And then we've also got the attachable earnings over on the right-hand side as well. Now, protected earnings for this one is going to be 60% because we've chosen the 2012 child support attachment. So in this case, as they are at the moment, you can see they're definitely earning enough to reach that full £240. So the full £240 can be deducted. Now, let's say there's been a little bit of change plan with this employee. They've actually fallen ill this month. So they're going to take the full month on statutory sick pay. So I'm just going to, they don't get it topped up, so I'm just going to clear these figures out. I'm going to go and enter a month of SSP in here. what off for the full month. So I'm just going to save that. So what you'll see now is that the attached earnings is just the sick pay plus the tax rebate. So that has lowered the amount quite considerably. Now, what that means is it can't actually take the full amount. So let's get my calculator back up. Now, what we want to do is we want to take the attachable earnings, so the 58960, and I'm just going to work out 60% of that. You can see that's £353.76. Now, if you look at the net pay, that's the figure that it's matching. So that's the 60% it can't go under, so it can't go below that amount. As a result of that, though, it isn't actually able to take the full £240 that was specified. It's actually only taken the £235.84 instead, and it's carried forward the rest of it. So that's £4.16 into the next pay period. So assuming the employee has sufficient attachable pay next pay period, that carried forward amount is going to be taken on top of the normal £240 deduction rate. So again, I am happy with this one. It's got that carried forward amount on it, but we'll look into that a bit more detail later on. But I'm happy with that for now. Let's move on to the final employee. So this is the employee with the non-priority attachment of earnings, set to take £150 per pay period. And in this example, the protected earnings is £1,000. So as we can see, they're being paid £2,500 this pay period. So it's way above that for the net pay. So it is able to take the full amount. But again, let's have a little bit of a change of plan here. So let's say that they're on reduced pay this month for whatever reason. So I'm just going to go back to the payments tab and change their normal salary. So instead of £2,500, I'm just going to change it to 1,100. Go back to the attachments tab. You can see that's now preventing it from taking the full £150. So it can only take £85.44 this pay period to make sure the net pay doesn't go below that £1,000 protected earnings that we set. Now, something a little bit different with this example compared to the last one. This one doesn't have an amount carry forward, you've probably noticed. So that is just because it is a non-priority attachment. If it was a priority attachment, there would be a carry forward amount on there, and then of course it would deduct the extra next pay period. But because this is non-priority, it doesn't actually carry forward the amount. So it just kind of drops that amount off. So I'm happy with this employee. Can't take the full amount, but they are non-priority, so that's absolutely fine. So I'm just going to save their enter payments as well. Now I'm happy with all this. All my payments are done. I'm happy with how they're calculating. At this point, I'm going to move on with my payroll. Now, there are a few different pre-update reports I'd like to show you. So I'm going to go into my pre-update reports for October. Now, the first thing I want to show you is the pay slips. So let's just take a look at a standard laser pay slip. So as you can see, for first employee, we have council tax, we have the full amount, and we can see the admin fee on a separate line on there as well. Employee 2 was on sick pay. So we can see the child support amount on there. It isn't the full amount, but we know that that is going to be carried forward into the next pay period for this one. And then finally, employee number 3 had the non-priority attachment. So firstly, we can see that the replacement description is displayed on the payslip. And again, it's not able to take the full amount due to the protected earnings, but as it's a non-priority, it won't carry that bit extra forward. So that's a little bit on how the payslips would look. I just want to show you an additional report in here as well. So if you go to summary down the left-hand side, you do also have an attachment of earnings report. I'll just do a little preview of this one. Just move that across. So this is a great report if you do have a few employees that have attachments. So it's just going to show you a bit of a breakdown of what attachment they have. If it does have anything carried forward, it'll have a to-date amount on there. It will also have any replacement descriptions on there as well. So it's really good just to keep tabs on, what's been carried forward, how much has been deducted so far, any protected earnings, things like that. So really handy report to use if you do have a few different people on attachments. So that's about it. So that's about it for the majority of processing attachments. I do just want to finish up this demo by showing you the next pay period. So I'm just going to quickly update my records. For October, and I'm just going to move my processing date on to November. So we've updated records for October. I'm just going to go back into enter payments for November. I just want to show you these attachment values for the next pay period. So employee reference 1, there's no difference to the salary, so it's still being deducted, as you can see, as normal. Now, employee number 2, let's go and give them their salary back and a bit of overtime. They've came back to work this month, so they're not actually getting statutory sick pay this time round. And if we look at the attachment tabs, you can see that carried forward amount is now being deducted in this pay period. So it's now able to take the £240 plus the £4.16 it couldn't take last pay period. So it's getting that bit extra back for employee 2. Now employee 3, if we just go and put their pay back to normal, look at the attachments, you can see what's changed for this employee is it can now take the full amount deducted, so it can take the 150, but as this is a non-priority attachment, it's not going to take anything extra this time round. So I do just want to finish up on a bit of a top tip. So this is going to apply to employees who have multiple attachments. So there is a particular order you want to deduct them. So priority attachments come first, of course. They will have priority in date order they received. Then non-priority will come after that. So currently employee number 3 has a non-priority attachment. Let's say they had another attachment come through, but this time it's for council tax. So I'm just going to jump into the employee record, along to employment and pay elements. Now, council tax is going to be a priority attachment of earnings order. So what I can do is I can go in and add my council tax. Now you can see what that's done is it has added the council tax in. However, it's put it as a priority attachment of 2. So I don't want that to happen. Now, with that one, I am going to need to swap them over. But if I try and change this council tax to 1, I will get an error message. So you can't have duplicate priorities. So just quite a good way around this is you can change your non-priority to 0. That will then allow you to change your council tax to 1. And then you can change your non-priority back to priority order 2. So that's just a bit of a top tip if you do receive a notice, just to get them swapped around and process that without any error messages. So that's it for the demo for today. I do want to just have a quick recap before we look at any questions at the end. So we went into the attachment tab in enter payments. That's going to give you all your information and detail regarding the attachments. So you've got your attached value on the left. So that's either going to be your normal deduction rate, which you've added, or it's going to be using the tables within the legislation area of payroll. You've then got your admin fee. So that's a £1 admin fee. If you have opted to set that up, again, that is completely optional. You've then got your attachable earnings. So that is the pay remaining, so attachable pay remaining after tax and national insurance. Then you've got the amount deducted. So that's what's actually going to be taken in this pay period. Then, if applicable, you'll have the amounts carried forward as well due to any protected earnings. But do remember that is only for priority orders. So that's it for the content for today's webinar. I did want to wrap things up by running through some further support, and then we'll take a look at some questions at the end. So we do have some great upcoming webinars in October, so make sure to follow the link on the handout, or you can go to sage.co.uk/webinars to take a look at those and get signed up. The Help Centre as well is a really great resource, so you can access that really easily by clicking on the help icon in Sage 50 Payroll, or you can access it via the web by going to sage.co.uk/help. So you can access your technical support guides on there, any recorded on-demand webinars, and also information on how to get in touch with the team if you need to. I do also want to shout out Sage University. It is a great resource. You do anything from bite-sized learning to full certifications on there, so you really can do it at your own pace. Just go to the link. It is totally free to set up an account and explore. But thanks again for joining me today, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. But it is goodbye for now.